Your date of birth?
Date of birth is 2/11/26.
And what is your address, Bill?
My address is 80 Cedar Street, Branford, Connecticut.
Thank you. Bill, were you drafted or did you enlist?
Was I what?
Were you drafted or did you enlist?
Oh, I volunteered. Yeah, so it's on the paper.
And where were you living?
Where was I living at that moment?
Yes.
I was living on my own in a little tiny room on York Street, New Haven, in the heart of Yale.
And that's New Haven, Connecticut?
In New Haven.
Do you recall the date that you enlisted?
I hate to have you repeat.
What was the date?
What was the street?
The date.
The date?
Yeah.
It was on my 17th birthday, I swore into the Navy. That was on February 11th, 1943.
Wow. Why did you choose the Navy?
Why did I?
Why did you choose the Navy?
Because they did, the main reason was I liked the Navy. I used to watch the ships, the ocean liners from the Palisades in New Jersey. When I was 12 years old, I was watching those ships dock, the beautiful ocean liners, the Normandy and the Queen Mary. And the Normandy is the one they sabotaged during the war. But I guess I got Navy-minded about that time. And then the fact that they take you when you're 17, that I couldn't get in fast enough at that time.
They did allow you to join when you were only 17?
Not without your parents' signature, but my mother's signed for me.
What were your first days in service like? Where did you go for induction?
First dates of service?
First days. What was that like when you first joined?
The first day? It was interesting, because a lot of these lads were spoiled at home. I was totally on my own at 16. Wow. So a lot of these lads were spoiled. And I remember one fellow from North Carolina in particular. He was 19 years old when we were up in the Aleutian Islands. And he was so homesick, he wrote home to his father. He said, "Daddy, when I get home, I'll milk the cows, I'll mow the hay." That's how homesick that lad was. And it was, the Aleutian Islands to me was like a Boy Scout adventure. We didn't come in direct combat with the Japanese at that point, though we were on alert, and on alert for 4 or 5 days at a time up in the mountains and in gun mounts. It was an anti-aircraft unit I was attached to at the time. And
well, Bill, before you went to the Aleutians, where did you do your basic training?
My basic training is Bainbridge, Maryland.
What was that like?
Well, my first day, I remember everybody was so polite, introducing you, bringing you to the barracks and everything. And the first morning, I heard a soft voice of the fellow in charge of the barracks. He said, "Good morning, children. Hit the deck!" You know, and everybody, I could hear shoes falling like leaves. And people scrambling to get ready. And that was the beginning of seeing how much you could take. And some of the fellows couldn't take it as well as the others. Those were the ones that were the spoiled most in civilian life. Everything went their way in civilian life, but they were out to see how much you could take. That was the boot camp training.
How long was your basic training?
9 weeks.
How was it for you?
How was it for me? Well, maybe my tonsils had something to do with it, but I was collapsing on guard duty, and they run me over to sick bay, and I had a temperature of 103 2/10, and they said my tonsils must come out. So the funny part about that base and the string of bases afterwards is Wednesday seemed to be on the tip of their tongues all the time. They said, Wednesday you'll have them out. Well, it was either Monday or Tuesday I was shipped out to the next stop. So the next stop was Norfolk, Virginia. And they said, yes, we'll have your tonsils out this coming Wednesday. And it was Monday or Tuesday I was shipped down to Virginia Beach for gunnery training. Then they said,
what did you do at Norfolk? What kind of training did you have at Norfolk?
Gunnery training, down at Virginia Beach, gunnery training. Training for beginning, for a week and a half we were being trained for armed guard aboard the merchant ships. And that time, that was a rough go they were having out there. They're sinking ships off the Jersey coast. So anyway, what happened is a week and a half into that training, they put a halt on our particular group, and we awaited more sailors from Sampson boot camp up in New York to come down and merge with us. And they had decided they wanted the anti-aircraft units in the Aleutian Islands. Well, that may be why I'm sitting here, because if I went through the Merchant Marine Armed Guard, the odds weren't too good out there.
So you were trained to be an armed guard for the Merchant Marines?
I was being trained for that, but they halted that about a week and a half into the training and put a hold on it. So we were cleaning barracks for mark time and doing a little painting until the group from Sampson come down and merged with us. Then we formed an anti-aircraft battery, 40 millimeter anti-aircraft battery. There.
And where did you go for that training?
Virginia Beach.
Oh, they trained you right there for the anti-aircraft?
And then they were training 90 millimeter, it's a larger bore, anti-aircraft, and 40 millimeters, and I was on one of the 40 millimeters. And
what was your job? Can you describe what you had to do?
On that, I was gun pointer. That you're set is alongside the barrel here, and the pointer elevated the gun as, and on the other side of me was a gun trainer. They called it the azimuth in the elevation, and we got up to the Aleutian Islands as a formed gun battery. Battery 410, if you want to put that down.
Yes. So it was battery 410, and
battery
were you
410.
just 40 millimeters? You operated only 40 millimeter anti-aircraft guns?
We were lucky for that year. What was I going to say?
Your trip to the Aleutians. What was your trip to the Aleutians like?
The trip up there?
Yeah.
The slowest trip slowest ocean voyage I ever had. It was on a converted Alaskan cruise ship, the Columbia. The Columbia was painted navy gray, and it was built in 1906. The plate, the thickness of the shell of the ship is the thickness of the plate, and the plates was something like ½ inch to 5/8, which is very thick. Quarter-inch was more of a standard, the actual thickness of the. So that ship lumbered along slow. It took 7 long days to get to Dutch Harbor. That's the Dutch harbors where they bombed.
Do you remember what it was like when you landed at Dutch Harbor?
Did I what?
What was it like when you landed at Dutch Harbor?
Well, when we landed there, we saw this beautiful, well, they looked beautiful to us. They had been bombed already, repaired. But the stucco barracks there, they looked like luxury, and they paraded us in there only to eat chow, and then marched us right out. Got us on the back of a big rack truck, a GMC rack truck, and we went across the valley and up around the mountains. We were only about up 500 or 600 feet from a snow cap. And this was in May of 19...
What year?
May, no, wait a minute, it was in June of 43. And we spent about 6 weeks at Dutch Harbor.
What did you do while you were there?
Well, we had some training, sort of light training, you might call it, where they plane identification. We had to know our planes from the Japanese. So what happened is this is not the brag, sit here and brag, I'm not bragging, but I have a couple of daughters who are academic wizards. But at age 14, down in the streets of East Haven, Connecticut, the chewing gum cards at that time were coming out with a lavender print of every new plane that was coming out. And that was instilled in my mind at age 14. When I was 17, I took the top grade of the Army and Navy class. I took the top grade because simply I had those chewing gum cards when I was 14. And they gave a brief description of each plane, the speed, the horsepower, and the different features about it. And so, like I say, I took the top grade. I got 3.9. 4.0 was perfect, but I had 3.9. The nearest fellow to me in the Army Navy class was an Army lad. He got 3.7. But not that I was a quick learner like my daughters. No, just that it came to me when I was 14 years old, instilled in me.
Wow.
So that helped. So I was on when we got to ADAC, we were only at Dutch Harbor about 6 weeks.
And then where did you go?
We moved out into the chain, about 2/3 to 3/4 of the miles out into the chains. I mean, the Aleutian chain was 904 miles long, all those islands extending out from Alaska. And that was the divider for the North, the Bering Sea and the North Pacific. And people ask me, well, was it cold up there? I say, when it did get cold, it got very cold. That's when icy blasts from the Bering Sea would overwhelm the influence of the Japanese current, which was grazing the underside of the islands. And that's when we seen 46 below one day, 48 below the next, and 54 below zero in the morning. Only a 17-year-old could get away with us, but I had walked to the chow hall. I had walked to the chow hall and walked back, which is about 3/4 of a mile each way. And when I got back to my tent door, they said, "Where were you?" Copeland said to everybody stay in their tents. And if I hadn't been 17 years old, I'd probably been 54 below zero. Who knows? I can't even stand zero weather today. But anyway, and I got back there. But here's something, I hope nobody feels insulted by my comments here, because I've lost so many friends to smoking. And I smoked up there for about five or 6 weeks. And I smoked up there for about 5 or 6 weeks. And then I had to trudge through the mud to get the cigarettes. Each time I drew up my daughter Valerie, who's living with me now. She was a baby, and we went to see Harry Ross, who was down at Stony Creek here, who was a CV. And when we walked in there, first thing he said to her, my wife, Valerie's mother, was, "Your husband shook off a glacier of snow on my Quonset." Anyway, so much for that. Then the CBs were saying goodbye to us the following March.
Well, Bill, while you were still there, though, before you left, while you were still there, what would you do? Would you fire at Japanese aircraft?
If they came.
How often did that happen?
They did not attack ADAC. I saw 5 planes crash, 4 of our own, and 1 Japanese. One Japanese crashed near the captain of port's office. And so anyway.
But would you go on your post and man that gun every day?
Oh, was I assigned to that post every day?
Yes.
No, not every day. We took turns. There was a member of the gun mount, and we had 44. We had 11 to each gun mount, and so one of our 11 would be on duty, and I happened to be on duty when that blizzard took place. But anyway, getting back to our departure from ADAC, it was the following March when...
From where? ADAC? From where? Your departure from where?
When was what?
You said your departure from where? What place?
Departure from ADAC to go back to the States for that time. And that was in March of 44, March of 1944. And the 42nd CB Battalion was saying goodbye to us. They were like uncles to us. So they're saying, you only got to do about another 8 months up here and you'll be on your way back to... Well, a big surprise took place. Mother Nature's, they just set up 9 more tents on the mountainside for us. We hated to give up our tent. We worked so hard at building up inside of it. And so the following day they were scheduled to leave, this 42nd Battalion. And they were saying goodbye to us. And that night, a Willie Waugh storm. I'll leave one of these with you, one of these copies of Willie Waugh newsletter that was come up for Willie Waugh storm. They're like miniature hurricanes. Instead of being hundreds of miles wide like they are here, they were about 4 or 5 miles wide. But there's a lot of turbulence in that donut, you know. Pick the lumber up off the pile and send it fluttering, lumber fluttering down the valley. Anyway, they say goodbye to us. We, that night, a Willie Waugh come along and wiped those 9 tents right off the mountainside. That was good news for us. The next day, we were aboard the same ship going back with the Seabees.
Oh, because your
that was a great feeling.
Away.
That was a great feeling. And anyway, we got back to Bremerton, Washington, across from Seattle.
How long did you stay in Bremerton?
Bremerton, we were there for a couple weeks, and then we got 25 days delayed orders, which meant like a home leave, delayed orders. So we headed back on the train back east here, and my folks were living on Bassett Street in New Haven at the time, and my mother and stepfather, and my brother came home on boot leave, basically from the Marine Corps, and our leaves overlapped. So we had the luxury of 2 brothers riding back to the West Coast on the same train. So anyway, once we got to the West Coast, my brother went north to Pendleton, the Marine Corps, and I went south to the amphibious base of Coronado below San Diego.
And what did you do in San Diego?
We trained for amphibious landings. Yeah.
How long were you there?
Oh, the summer of 44. Yeah.
Now,
That's where I got my gunner's mate rating.
at San Diego, were you still in the anti-aircraft?
No, after a couple of months at Pearl Harbor, where it was more like a stopover, I went on to pick up my ship when the first time and get a ship, and then after, you know, but my ship.
So you went from San Diego to Pearl Harbor?
No, I went. Oh yes, from San Diego, went to Pearl Harbor for a couple of months, and that's where I was reconditioning machine guns. And anyway, my brother caught up to me at that point, and he was on his way to Iwo Jima. Anyway, I went on to the Philippines and got my first ship at Leyte in the Philippines, in the middle of the Philippine operation.
Now,
That's where I actually, you could say, made contact with the enemy when we had to run from the beach.
what ship did you get? What ship, when you went to Pearl Harbor, you said you got assigned to your first ship.
I didn't get the ship until I sailed to the Philippines and then got my ship.
What was the name of your ship?
The name of my ship was the USS Barnstable. And this ship, I voyaged on 8 different ships during the war. And I think it was the Nashova, I'm not too sure, another aviator brought us to the Philippines, where I was chugging up to that ship in a landing craft, and I looked at my ship. See, Barnstable? I could say. It was Barnstable, Mass. That's what I was named after.
Now, when you picked up your ship, the U.S. Barnstable, at Leyte, Philippines, was that ship involved in the Battle of Leyte?
Oh, yes. That ship, well, I wasn't aboard when the actual, she almost caught on P-38 saved the ship. Came out of nowhere, and the kamikaze had zeroed in on my ship. But I wasn't there. I was right there shortly after. You know, like I say, the first, if you call contact, I was unarmed, and I was running from the beach to get on the landing craft, and it was cut loose behind me. Our army and the Japanese were exchanging it, and that was the first. You might call it taste of combat, but I wasn't. I was unarmed, so I couldn't defend myself. I had just run for the landing craft, dive aboard the landing craft. And the landing craft was already starting to pull off the beach when I dove in there.
Wow.
But then there was, after that we sailed for Okinawa. And I was saying to myself, 1,100 ships here. We got the biggest fleet in the world, 1,100 ships at Okinawa. Later we heard about Normandy, 5,600 ships when we heard about that. But anyway.
Now, can you tell me what it was like at Okinawa? What was Okinawa like?
It was, the first day was quiet on our end, though we had a British cruiser firing over our heads all day long. But my job was to flag the landing craft in. I felt pretty good about being on the captain's gig, be assigned a captain's gig. But that pride turned to uneasiness when the commander, the second in charge of our ship, the captain stayed with the ship. The lieutenant commander, he was in command of the landing craft,
And you were on the landing craft?
I was on the leader of the landing craft, which was the captain's gig. So that was a snub nose like a cabin cruiser. And Lieutenant Commander Brady, he ordered me up on the bow and I had to stand there with a flag like this. Felt like a sitting duck for the longest 15 minutes of my life. And when on his command, I'd have the flags out like this, and they called it rendezvous. The landing craft were rendezvousing around in a circle, a bunch of maybe about 20 landing craft. Then on his command, I'd raise the flags. When I'd raise the flags, they'd sidle up alongside each other. And then on his command again, I'd push the flags forward and they go into the beach. But as soon as that's done, there's no extracurricular activity on my part. I dove at the bottom of that boat. And so far, I blended in with the paintwork. Anyway.
And did you have to do that for several times, for several waves? Did you do that signaling just one time or several times?
Oh, no, one time was enough. Yeah. Anyway, but here's an interesting thing about when we were on our way towards the beach. We looked at the landing craft from another ship, the APA 153, I remember that number. Saw a fellow with gray in his temples and a khaki baseball type wave. And I said to myself, we don't wave to each other out here. So I politely waved back. And it wasn't until months later, back and forth on the West Coast, that I knew who I was waving to.
Who?
It was Ernie Pyle. Ernie Pyle, I saw him 16 days before it happened. And 16 days later on the tiny island of Ishimo off of Okinawa, that's where his life ended there. But he was a GI. He was a GI's friend.
How long were you in Okinawa, Bill?
How long was I there?
Yeah.
Only 6 days.
It's long enough.
The first, but
what, were you still on the USS Barnstable
yes.
in Okinawa?
And we considered ourselves the luckiest. No, what did I do here?
No, that's okay. Let me.
Considered ourselves the luckiest ship afloat.
Why?
Because we hadn't lost a man yet, and we got together in 1999 out in Springfield, Illinois, and we all agreed we were the luckiest ship afloat. And we up anchored at Okinawa. That's when. Oh, there's another little thing that might be of interest to you. After the first day at Okinawa in the small boats, we went aboard another ship to Ichao. So I met some of the fellows I had trained with at Coronado, and they said, "You're on the 93. It got hit." And I said, "Where?" They said, "The starboard side of number 2 hatch." Oh, I got the sinking feeling because my buddy, who was a survivor of the Yorktown before he got aboard our ship, he would be working in that area. And so for 3 days, I was under the impression, resolving myself to expect the worst. 3 days later, we chug up to the ship. I don't see any damage on the outside. No tarpon. They used to put tarpons over the hole when the kamikaze planes would make a hole in the ship. If the ship didn't sink, there'd be a big hole there, and they draped tarpons over to keep the seawater from splashing in. And they bring the line up around the other side and fasten this canvas to that hole in the ship. There's no canvas, no nothing. I went up the gangway, I got down in the compartment. There's my buddy, sound asleep on my bunk, because he didn't want to dirty his own bunk with his dirty clothes. But knowing him, he probably worked about 30 hours straight. And Howie Webb was his name. And I was so tickled to see him alive. There was never a finer moment in the Pacific. I looked over at sunset going down there, shimmering off the water. I was at peace with the world, knowing he was alive. So anyway, we left Okinawa, and as we were leaving, first heavy concentrations of kamikazes were coming over. And we picked them up on a radar, and 40 to 60 aircraft. And I was at the director pit. I had a heavy soup bowl helmet like this with a thick padding for the earphones. And I was hearing the Rangers being called from the bridge. I'd relay them to the gun pointer, at the director. That was Agazinski, a fellow from Merida. And at that point, Aggie broke down. As soon as he heard 30 to 60 planes, he started shaking like a leaf. He soaked his T-shirt like he dove overboard. In a flash, the perspiration surged through his body. Took 3 of us to get him out of that director pit. And no discredit to that man. He had seen so much war before he got aboard our ship. He was 3 years on the submarines. So no discredit to him whatsoever for breaking down. And took 3 of us to get us out of the director pit. And I took over the director and handed the soup bowl helmet to another lad. And if we had only held together another, I can't measure the time in my mind, but 5 minutes, 10 minutes. But they veered away from us. They didn't want us because they've seen us leaving. They figure we're empty. They're not going to waste a plane on an empty ship. So that was my experience in Okinawa. I'll never forget it. It was the Navy's Iwo Jima. My brother went to Iwo Jima, and they lost 6,000 Marines, 1/3 of the division there, and they lost 4,000 sailors at Okinawa. 3,900 or something like that, almost 4,000. Anyway, but...
Were you able to keep track of your brother during the war? Did you know where he was stationed? Could you write to each other?
Well, I got a letter from my mother. It was late, months late. I knew they took Iwo Jima, but the letter home to my mother from my brother was we got them on the run, and that's it. My brother saved a fellow Marine's life on the rim of a bomb crater. It took years and years and years for my brother to loosen up a little, talk about it at all. But he was in the bomb crater. I asked him, I said, Bob, did you have anything to take cover behind? He said, wrecked vehicles and bomb craters. He was in a bomb crater when his buddy on the ridge of the bomb crater got hit. And my brother ran up and carried him down off the rim of the bomb crater. And his name was Vincent Morena. He's over in Hamden here. I hope he's still alive. I've been meaning to try to get through to him because they met in 1993. And I'm glad they met, have some kind of reunion. And this story is, it's hard to sit here and say this is true, that's true, or this isn't true, or that isn't true. But I'm not, I collect my thoughts, and I'm not exaggerating, trying not to exaggerate. But my mother, when she lived on Bassett Street, New Haven, she used to walk down to catch the trolley on Winchester Avenue each day. And she saw this old fella getting grease out of the trolley tracks. And she'd say good morning to him every morning. One morning, she says, how are you this morning? He says, not so good. I lost my one son got a telegram. My one son was gone yet in Europe, and my other son was seriously wounded in the Pacific. Well, that seriously wounded son was Vincent Morena, who my brother carried down off the brim of.
Wow.
So when Bob and I were home on leave together, this was in 1944, this you may find impossible to believe, but I believe there are psychic people out there. My mother had a dream that we were all home, the war was over. We were standing in a large window, like a store window. She told us this dream in 1944 when they were living on Bassett Street. So she said we were standing in a large window, and I was home, and my sister was up from Florida with her husband, and it seemed like their children around, and standing next to us. But Bob hadn't come home yet, but she saw him in the haze, but she woke up before she could figure out if he made it home or not. Well, if a psychic dream could ever come true, yeah. In 1946, the war was over. My mother and stepfather rented a house on the seawall down in Morris Cove, and we're expecting my brother. And I looked down through. I went out on the front porch. I looked again, standing in a large glass window, and yes, this is the truth. My sister's children were up there, and I looked, I saw a military figure walking along the seawall, and I said to myself, that is a Marine uniform, and I broke into a sprint. I ran, got his baggage he was carrying. He got off the wrong stop, so he got and had to walk the length of the seawall. And it was a hazy day, and it worked out just the way her dream. I can't. Anyway, but he had Freelander's pneumonia. He got through Iwo without a scratch, and then he got to Japan on occupational duty, and he swooped up what he thought was water in a hurry, and it was kerosene. You see, as long as he developed Freelander's pneumonia, he was on a hospital ship 4.5 months coming home.
Bill, where did you go after your ship left Okinawa?
We, let's see, I think we went to the West Coast. I know we picked up a typhoon along the way. What
was that like?
I was I was on spud locker duty at that time. In other words, fruit preparation, a little hatchway, and had a potato picker, a potato peeling machine, spun around and sanded off the outer shell with a potato. Anyway, we were in a typhoon. The ship was heaving back and forth, and I said to myself, if I'm going to get a night's sleep, I got to tie myself down. So I managed to lash myself down to the spud locker bench, the food preparation bench. So I did not get a night's sleep after all, because across the way on that would be the port side. On the port side, a dough tub from the bake shop, they're like steel bathtubs on wheels, broke loose from where they had lashed it, and it sailed across the room. It chattered like a clickety-clackety railroad track, and it collided with the pots that were lashed under the boot, the opposite bench. Then the ship would toss again, and the dough tub would clatter along, smash into the wall down there, and then the ship would heave again. And up topside, they were telling me that the waves were coming right over the bow, and that's a big ship, 492 foot long with a 72 foot beam. So anyway,
then where were you stationed when you got back to the West Coast?
after we left the Philippines. Well, we did go down shuttling troops up from down by the equator. And we pricked not too many troops this time, more equipment. We got 24 miles out, and we slid up on a reef.
Where was this?
That was off northern New Guinea, you know.
That was before Okinawa?
After.
Oh, so before you came home to the United States.
Oh, the war was winding down very much. We felt comparatively safe for the enemy at that point. But we were 24 miles out when we slid up on that reef. And we sat there for 72 hours. The captain pulled out all the stops. First, he ordered all the landing craft over the side. They were pushing full throttle, trying to push it off the reef. That wasn't working. So he ordered the hatch covers pulled. That's about 45 feet down to the clammy atmosphere down there in the keel. To chip concrete out of, they used to pour concrete in the keels to keep the ship weighted down right when they build the ship. Chipping concrete out of the one side of the keel. And they were in that clammy atmosphere there and equator temperatures topside. They were passing out every 20 minutes or so. So they'd haul them up in a cargo net and plank them on deck, and the doctor would be there to revive them. But anyway, that wasn't working either. The net result is it took 3 Australian tugboats and 2 of our own tugboats to get us off of there. We finally slid off. But then because of the naturalist caused by the removal of the concrete, we could only go 7 knots, which we normally go 15, 18 knots. So we're on our way to see Admiral Nimitz. My captain was supposed to account for this. So we pulled into Manila Bay, and the chaplain come down on the deck. He said, "The war is now over." And at that point, I couldn't see my captain, but I imagine he was going like this, because everything went by the board. So it was an interesting experience out there.
So you were in Manila when you heard that the war was over?
What's that?
You were in Manila when you heard that the war was over?
Right.
What was the reaction of the crew like?
What did it seem like?
Yeah.
Well, I heard about 50 or 60 lads that were present on that deck at the time. They all let out a, you know, and that was, they knew the only formality of signing the armistice was left in front of them. This was August 15th when that announcement come over. So we made a trip to Japan, and in assault fashion, the first trip we were ready for assault. Landed the troops and everything in case the armistice was not sticking. Yeah, I mean, and we first, yeah, landed troops in Osaka, Japan. About 6 weeks later, we come back and landed without assault fashion. Landed comfortably in Kuri.
Where's that?
That was north of Osaka, up the coast. K-U-R-E is the way you spell it. And Kuri, Japan. And what was I going to say about that? Yeah. He sang. Was he sing?
I don't know.
I think he was singing at our get-together there. Anyway, at Kuri, as a young lad, I was disappointed because I couldn't go to Ground Zero where Hiroshima. That was only 29 miles north of Hiroshima. And our officers went, but the enlisted personnel were not allowed to go. And I am glad to this day that I didn't go, because when we had the reunion, only one officer showed up. I'm wondering how their lives could have been shortened by the radiation that was still lingering there. But anyway, at Kuri, we got a glimpse of what the B-29s had done. That's not the atomic bomb, conventional bombings. The B-29 saturated Korea. There's only a street and a half of walls with no roofs on the whole city. And we saw a Japanese cruiser that had been driven aground by the B-29s, and it just was up ashore with a bow on their bent guns on it. So, oh yeah, that brings to mind back in Manila, when I finally got to Manila, there was, you see masts sticking up out of the water in Manila Bay. That was an interesting bay. Manila Bay was, when you entered by Corregidor, you go along, you don't see anything. You like being on the open ocean again. That's how big that bay is. And then you start to see masts sticking out of the water as you got close to the city of Manila. So this little tidbit is probably nothing you're interested in, but I bought a hand crank phonograph in Honolulu before I went out that far. I went hand crank photograph with a stack of records, maybe 4 inches thick. And I was playing them on the ship later till we were in Manila, and also mate in charge of the barber says, get rid of that. He was in a hangover mood, you know. So I had to follow orders. I carried it into Manila, and that fellow was setting up shop, a Filipino there, setting up his shop for railway seats to buy or sell anything. And I had paid $5 for it in Honolulu, the stack of records included. And I got $35 for it out there.
Wow.
So that my father would have been proud, because he was a good businessman. Anyway.
And then where did you go after Japan?
After Japan, I think we made a trip direct. See, I'm not sure in my mind whether it was right after Okinawa or right after Japan. But the typhoon going home to Oakland, California. That's by San Francisco.
And
then,
were you discharged in Oakland?
The funny part about it, I was within a point and a half eligibility for discharge, and we set sail again. We were 2 days out to sea, and I couldn't dive overboard and swim back, you know, for my discharge. So what happened, I had to make one more trip, pick up troops and bring more troops home.
Where did you go?
I think we went back to the Philippines at that
To pick up troops and bring them back home to the United States?
Was what part of the United States?
You went back to the Philippines to pick up troops to bring them home to the United States?
Bring them home, yeah.
And then were you finally able to be discharged?
Oh, yeah, so at the end of that trip. But interesting, another little tidbit, interesting thing was Christmas Eve of 1945. It was cool, so quiet you could hear a pin drop on that deck, steel deck. And it was so quiet on Christmas Eve, and it was a somber mood when everybody. Then Mother Nature gave us the most beautiful Christmas card you could ever ask for. The sunset, 1/3 of the sky was quilted tufts, like a quilt on a satin quilt on it. Tufts and tufts and tufts of pillows all hold together, 1/3 of the Pacific sky. And I said, that's the most beautiful sunset I've ever seen and I ever expect to see. And it was the most beautiful sunset.
Where were you then? Was that in the Philippines?
Mid-Pacific.
Oh,
Mid-Pacific.
in the middle of the Pacific Ocean.
Yeah, coming home, and the ship's doctor put together a Christmas show, and hey, the ship's doctor, he wasn't a good singer, but he sang "I'll Be Home for Christmas," and he tried to put together the ship he could. And the new cook aboard the ship was new, not new to the Navy, new to us. He spent 6 years out in the islands. He had that Asiatic stare and everything. he told the seamen to go enjoy your Christmas show. I'll clean up. So he's about 15 feet behind the doctor in the cage area. He's banging around the pots in the background, slim bang, bang. He comes out of there, and he's all covered with dough and everything. He comes up behind the doctor, and this is an officer. He's tapping on the rear end with a spatula. And the doctor looked jerked for a minute, then he listened to him. He said, "Don't know how many of you fellows know our new cook, but he's been aboard a matter of weeks here, and he'd like to give us a song." Well, he gave us, that was the hit of the show because he couldn't sing a note. He'd ride off on every stanza. And somebody from the south there, there was about a couple hundred people and a couple hundred sailors in that area, and the captain included. The captain was sitting about a dozen feet away from me, and we're all being polite to the new cook, but he was drying off on every stanza, and the captain was trying to be polite too. He had his hands over his face. You could see his face was turning blue. Then somebody from the south let loose with a southern drawl. Yak, 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 yak. Then somebody else, yak, yak. Then the whole house came down. The next day on deck, I said to Bumby, he was a darn good cook. I said, "You have some wonderful talent in that commissary division." You should have thrown him over. But that's the serious side of my life. But I'm grateful to one thing that come out of the 40s.
What?
Groucho Marx, Red Skelton, and Bob Hope.
Wow.
And Groucho was my favorite. My wife's favorite was Red Skelton. Gave me my sense of humor that keeps me loose today.
Yeah. Bill, when you were overseas, how did you stay in touch with your family?
What's that?
When you were overseas and on ship, how did you stay in touch with your family at home?
Oh, through letters, through the mail.
Was the mail service good for the Navy, being out in the ocean?
Well, sometimes we approach a new island and the mail would be waiting for us on that island.
And what was the food like?
The food on the ship was wonderful. Even though it dehydrates, this Bumby, the cook I was telling you about, he would take a whole vat, a bowl that big, full of dehydrated potatoes. Then he would throw about 3 or 4 1-pound blocks of butter in that, whip it up. He'd have it tasting like stateside. Far contrast from the K rations up in the Aleutian Islands.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask you. In the Aleutians, what did you eat in the Aleutians?
In the Aleutians? What did I do?
What did you eat?
Eat. Well, at times we were 3 or 4 or 5 days on alert at the gun mounts. And that's when we'd have K rations, which was like an oversized Cracker Jack box. It was sort of khaki brown box sealed with paraffin, sealed with wax on the outside. There'd be 3 dog biscuits, the fellas call them. They call them dog biscuits. I like them. They're vitamin biscuits. And a small can of potted meat, a tiny can that big. And what else? Can't think of the other things. But I had their dog biscuits. I like those biscuits.
Did you do anything special for good luck?
Did I ever what?
Did you do anything special for good luck?
For good luck? What was the other?
Did you do anything special for good luck?
I heard good luck.
Did you do anything special?
A special for good luck?
Yeah.
Well, I'm not too much of a superstitious individual, but over the years, Well, my folks were breaking up in 1940, and I'll make this as brief as I can. It wasn't a pleasant experience for us children. I was 14 years old at the time. My school grades were dropping, and I get home and I hear it going on, and I retreat up into the attic and clay sculptured and listen to the radio with Bob Hope, Red Skelton, and Groucho Marx. And that's where the foundation for my humor, and that was in 1940. And I can make anybody laugh. I've got a string of them. At the housewarming, I had a list of my humor list, and I'd have them ask me that topic, this topic, the Bronx Zoo, Mount Everest. I'll just run Mount Everest by you because I know we haven't all it. Mount Everest, I had a dream one night that I was on a time warp back to 1953. And we were on the slopes of Mount Everest. I was part of Sir Edmund Hillary's crew. We were at the 5,000-foot level when he stopped for a moment. He says, "Gentlemen, I'd like to use for a moment and introduce you to the most famous mountain climber the world has ever known. He deserves a pat on the back from all of us." And then he looks down and says, "Oh my, apparently I battled him a bit too hard."
Oh!
And he goes on to sing, "Singing is good for morale when you're on the mountainside, but one song I never, never want to hear is, let me go, let me go." You ever hear that song yourself?
No.
No? Oh, the seniors heard them.
Bill, what did you do? Whoa. What did you do for stress?
What did I do?
Yes. Was there stress? Did you have stress on the job? It had to be stressful when you were overseas.
Stress? No, because I was just another kid, another swabby. And to me, I was on my own when I was 16, so that made a difference. No homesickness. No homesickness. Every new adventure was in front of me, and I preoccupied with that. And but the greatest gift I've had in life is my sense of humor. That's kept me loose. I have friends that did not have a sense of humor, and quite a few of them are gone. Yeah.
What did people do for entertainment? What did you do for entertainment when you weren't on duty? When you were on board the ship?
Entertainment on the ship?
Yes.
Well, it's funny. Because everything was so serious, I kept a lid on my jokes during that because, you know, the misinterpretation can cause misinformation, you know. That's why when I knew my brother was going to Iwo Jima, I wouldn't breathe a word of it to not one of my 512 shipmates.
Why?
Because the grapevine in the jungle is can be just as deadly as the grapevine on the East Coast here. In other words, I knew he was going there, and the Japanese would have been aware of it because it would have gone through the jungle like lightning, and they probably would have lost another 1,000 Marines. As it was, they knew they were coming. Yeah.
Bill, what did you do after you were discharged from the service?
Sold pots and pans door to door. Well, first job was in the greenhouse, which so many jobs. It's the greenhouse, and then in the summer of '46, I was knocking doors, selling pots and pans. Then, what else? I worked at Stanley's Dry Goods when I was 16, just before I went in the Navy. I welded parachute brackets the summer of '42. That's when I was 16. And as subcontractors were working off of American tube bending, and I was working for a subcontractor for 40 to 45 cents an hour. And American tube bending, the ladies were getting 65, 70 cents an hour for the same job, very same job. These parachute brackets had to be perfect. There's no
Wow. Yeah. Now, I know that you got married, and how many children did you have?
We had 5.
Did you attend any reunions after the war?
Reunions of the ship, one in 1999. That's where I told you, Springfield, Illinois. We toured Lincoln's tomb, and Lincoln was buried under 10 feet of concrete.
Do you stay in touch with any of your buddies from the war?
I was talking to Howie Webb, the fellow from New Yorktown, only about a month ago on the phone. Yeah. But most of them are gone. Only thing keeps me around is my sense of humor. Keeps me loose.
Did you join any veterans organizations after the war?
I helped form VFW here in Brantford in 1949. Then I went working nights in the bakery. I come back about a year and a half later, and they sort of fell apart. So I understand they've got a new one in here since. It's doing a lot better. And then I belonged to the DAV in West Haven for about 8 years. And then the American Legion in Clinton and Deep River.
How did your military experience influence your thinking about war?
Thinking about?
How did your military experience influence your thinking about war?
I heard you say military service.
And how you think about war. Did that influence how you think about war?
My tour in the war, our cause was survival. There's no doubt that Hitler was the biggest threat, and it was a matter of survival. What they're doing now in Afghanistan may not be the average opinion, but I believe they have to. These young lads have to put their lives on the line for 2 years at a time, and they get their hits if they make it home. But when you're up against someone who might walk in a building like this and say there's, how many you see here, about 80 people, and just let themselves blow up and take out 80 other people. There's nothing godly about that. That's too sick to let loose. 9/11 would tell us that there'd be a lot more 9/11s if they weren't there. And that's my firm belief, is that there'd be a lot more 9/11s if they didn't keep them pinned down.
Bill, how did your service affect your life?
Well, I'd say it left me with a basic initiative, but I never knew how to make the fast buck. I went out in the woods, and my wife and I built our house 2 rooms at a time. And that's why I consider her, she's gone 9 years in August, the mother of the 20th century. She hauled buckets of waters up 200-foot embankment, gradual, but nevertheless uphill. And she poured them in a tile, a brown tile pipe that I had set up in a galvanized bathtub, which half the tile was half full of sand. Filtered the water through, and they come out usable for dishes and laundry. Then we drive 5 miles to get the beautiful spring water at Madison Springs over there. But we worked together, and everybody wanted her. She loved children that much. They wanted her to babysit in Madison, Deep River, Clinton, and she was in demand. You'd only have to meet her once to know what the mother of the 20th century. Yeah.
Bill, is there anything that I haven't asked that you want to add? Is there anything I forgot to ask you about?
Well, other than my goals, my transportation.
Yeah.
You might find that interesting. I got a 3-wheel tricycle. That's battery driven. It's got two 12-volt batteries, and it'll climb any hill and go from here. And but did get caught in the frigid dampness this winter down the Cedar Woods, and it's got some moisture trapped behind the fuel gauge. I've been in touch with where they manufacture them.